So hi, everybody. I'm Kristen Pozzoboni, and I'm the Director of Impact Services here at ResultsLab. And I am really excited and very pleased to be able to moderate this, what I hope will be a really fun, informal conversation about a wonderful initiative that's been going on that we've had the honor of being part of. ResultsLab, we're a woman-owned social enterprises that collaborates with nonprofits, grant makers, and communities to design and implement intentional approaches for using data. And we strive to have everyone who works with us feel more confident and equipped to engage with data and to have a more intentional evaluation practice. We really look at data for the main use of learning. We want to go beyond compliance, go beyond accountability, go beyond reporting, and figure out how can we use data for each individual organization so that people can use it for learning, whether that be for continuous quality improvement or if you want to tell your impact story. Today, we're here to spotlight the work that we've been partnering with for Caring for Denver for the past 3 years to support their evaluation capacity building initiative. So we have about 75 minutes together, and we are going to engage in a conversation about that. Caring for Denver is an independent nonprofit foundation that was founded in 2019. And it's funded by sales tax dollars to address Denver's mental health and substance misuse needs. At the end of the 2024, Caring for Denver had awarded over $185 million to 270 unique organizations serving Denver communities. And they were reaching, at that time, over 95,000 people in Denver. And that was at the end of 2024. So those numbers have most likely only grown. So we're really excited to hear about this approach that's been grounded in community-informed processes that the Caring for Denver and their nonprofit partners or grantees have been involved in. So joining me today are 2 members of the Caring for Denver Evaluation and Learning Team and 2 nonprofit partners or grantees that participated in the initiative. So what I'd love for us to do is just to have each one of the panelists introduce yourself, maybe your name, your role, a little bit about your organization, if you're a nonprofit, and how you were engaged or participated in this process. So I'm going to start with Rebecca.
Sure. Thanks, Kristen. Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Ochtera. I'm the Director of Evaluation and Learning here at Caring for Denver. How I participated in this, this was really my brainchild in some ways. So we're really doing the designing, exploring how we are going to work on capacity building as an organization. And I provide oversight internally to the whole process, as well as do our own internal evaluation of our investments. And then I can turn it over to Haley.
Can everyone shut their mute? There we go. Thank you. Haley, go for it.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Haley Sammen, and I'm the lead evaluation learning partner at Caring for Denver. And I've been with the foundation for just 4 years now. So after Rebecca was kind of building things, I was the first one to be brought in as we started building out our evaluation learning internal team. And so this project was something that, has been around almost as long as I've been around at Caring for Denver. And my role was really just to, do a lot of the facilitation with Kristen and kind of just make sure we were, we connected, I don't know, probably over 100 grant partners over the 3 years, Kristen, to you all. And so, just a lot of logistics and the learnings between our 2 teams. We had regular meetings to kind of be meeting and learning along the way. So it's been really fun. And I'll kick it over to Danica.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Danica Snyder. I am the Director of Student and Family Support Programs at Florence Creighton Services in Colorado. My nonprofit serves pregnant and parenting youth. I'm overseeing the wraparound services, which is really 4 pillars: family services, housing services, clinical services, and workforce development. We see about probably 200 parents a year. I'm going on my 16th year working here. I love it here. And I'll tag Megan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Megan. I'm the program director of a program called Youth Building Legacy Now for DSST public schools in Denver. I was a school social worker, and I started an after-school program, and then with partnership from Caring for Denver, was able to build that into a program where we support 11th and 12th graders to set up and run peer mental health support spaces for about 150 kids weekly across Denver. And I was a member of the most recent ACT cohort.
Thank you so much. So today is really about just having an informal conversation. I have a few questions prepped. I thought what we would do is set the stage a little bit to start. And what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about what was offered and some of the thinking and strategy behind that before we get into the actual conversation. So across this evaluation capacity building initiative, ResultsLab partnered with Caring for Denver to really be an extension of their amazing data and learning and evaluation team, and to be learners along the way. And together we created 3 ways to engage in learning. We had, and they all had different touch points, so different levels of commitment, different levels of engagement. And so the first way was what we call a collab, and that was a 6-month engagement where it was 1 hour per month, where you met with one of our facilitators or coaches, and there was peer-to-peer learning. And we also curated a resource bank for the participants. The second way to participate was what we were calling one-on-one consultancies. And that was approximately a 3 to 5 month engagement, about 8 to 12 hours per grantee or nonprofit partner. We dedicated one ResultsLab coach to that organization, and they collaborated together to develop a bunch of different things. So it could have been, the first thing was a Caring for Denver framework, some sort of data collection practice or tool. It could have been a measurement plan. We could have helped with some of the data systems or structures, or we could have been helping them to think through decision-making for how they wanted to gather their data or analyze their data. We created what we called learning and evaluation snapshots, where they were like 1-pagers, where we documented all the work that we did together in the one-on-one consultancy. And the main purpose of that was really to support the nonprofit partner in reporting on their framework that they created with the data and evaluation and learning team at Caring for Denver. And then the third option we kind of delivered for the last 2 years were what we call our ACT learning cohorts. And ACT stands for Align, Capture, Transform. It's a framework that we've created here at ResultsLab. And it really it's a framework to basically do some strategy, intentional thinking about why you're doing evaluation and what kind of outcomes and data you need to be collecting, and making intentional decisions about that. And then moving through capture, how do you go ahead and capture that information? What kind of tools or instruments you need? And then what do you do with it once you have all of this data? You can analyze it, you need to share it. And so it takes everyone through this full, this cycle, this ACT cycle. And we did a learning cohort. It was a 1-year engagement. We start with 4 2-hour guided sessions where we introduce each one of the phases: align, capture, transform. And then for that next year, each one of the organizations is paired with their own consultant for 48 hours of coaching over that year to work in this workbook that we created for the experience. And all of the nonprofit partners have the opportunity to work in a low stress environment, meaning that it's more like a laboratory. There's no pressure to have to do any of it. It's more just like explore all of these different phases, align, capture, transform. Talk about the ones that are really interesting to you and your organization with your coach, and learn what makes sense for you. So different organizations can really lean into different parts of the align, capture, transform, depending on what was useful for them. And then at the end of that, everyone has a workbook that they worked on. So that was what was offered. But I think that one of the things that's really important is thinking about the whys. And so I'm going to hand it back to Caring for Denver to talk a little bit about what informed your why.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kristen, and for such a great explanation of the work we've been doing together over the last couple of years. So for Caring for Denver, there are a lot of whys for capacity building, but I wanted to hit on three of the main ones. And the first one was, Kristen mentioned, we're relatively new. We've been around since 2019. And when we first started, a pillar of our work, a core value for the organization was around being community authored and driven. And we took that very seriously when we thought about how we wanted to approach evaluation and learning as an organization, as a foundation. And part of what that led to was having a really unique evaluation and learning model. So Kristen mentioned we've worked with over 200 grantees. We work with about 200 grantees, maybe a little bit over that during the course of the year. And each year, we are actually building a tailored evaluation plan for each of our grantees. So what that means is once a grant is funded, the grantee partner works with their program officer and an evaluation and learning partner to really sit down, think about what the grant is, what they're going to be doing, what they hope to accomplish or see happen because of that. And we build an evaluation model around that. So grantees are really in a deep learning partnership with us. That also means a little more responsibility for all of us around data and evaluation. And we want to support grantees and having what they need to be able to do that well. Another piece of this for us is around a commitment to equity. So we very much believe in equitable evaluation practices, and we want to support grantees in practice-based evidence. So we recognize that they are bringing a lot of expertise, knowledge, understanding that we don't have sitting in our offices. You know, they've been in the field doing this for quite a while, most of them for a very long time. And we really want to shift away from thinking about, and Kristen mentioned this in the beginning, but it's very much a core of our model too, is that we want to shift away from thinking about data solely as an accountability tool for a grantee around a grant, but really about having evaluation that is, it's data for meaning, it's data for use. It can really matter to the grantee. It could help them be and do their best in this work because they are learning, they're understanding more, there's flexibility and adaptability along the way with their grant, so they can just have the most impact possible for their grant. So when you think about all those things together, it is really imperative as a foundation that we recognize and invest in grantee capacity for evaluation. So we can go to the next slide.
Sure.
We also wanted to talk a little bit about what success looks like for us. And I'll say, you know, this is something that we're still learning and evolving. We've been doing this work for quite a while, but when we started with ResultsLab, this is essentially where we landed, the three primary things that we were looking for. These were our metrics to say, okay, are we making progress? Is this really helping our grantees? So the first one, and these are in no particular order, but the first one, we wanted to see that grantees had a new skill, a new or a revised tool, or that they had resources that they were talking about utilizing that was helping them get to a place of better data collection, data use, data management, data reporting, anything around evaluation and data. The second piece of that, and Kristen kind of mentioned this and what they were helping us do, but for grantees to be able to better report on the true value and impact of their work, how they defined it, how they saw it within the space of mental health and substance misuse for us and for our foundation. And so this was a big piece of it. And it's not just reporting for us. We also were interested and curious to see if they were talking about how they were using it with other potential funders, how they were using it internally to help their staff better understand their programs, or their stakeholders really know the true value and meaning of the work that was happening. And then the last one, I think perhaps the one that has become the most important for me, just recognizing in the foundation space We've done a disservice, quite frankly, in the foundation world in terms of how we have built mental models around data and evaluation. And so we're trying to shift that a little bit. And so what we want to see is grantees moving from a mental model of like, this is just a checkbox. It's what we turn in at the end of the year. This is an obligation to the funder, and it's only for the funder's use. But we really want to see grantees moving into being more curious about data. I love seeing that show up. And when you all were putting things in the chat, it's that curiosity around data, evaluation, being more motivated around it, actually starting to reflect internally on how this was working for them or not working for them. And so really seeing that excitement and engagement around data and evaluation was a big signal of progress for us as well. Those are not the only ones. And I think actually having Megan and Danica here is really great because you get to hear about other pieces of success and maybe what this looks like, maybe even some challenges too, I don't know. But just wanted to set the stage in terms of what we were looking for and how we started this partnership with ResultsLab.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, so it kind of gives you a sense of what we've all been engaged in for the last 3 years. And what I thought we'd do now is I just have a couple questions. Would love to hear from different people. Not everyone has to answer everything, but let's just jump in and share. And what the first question is, what was it like for you and your team to participate in this experience? And maybe you could talk a little bit about what some of the benefits were, as well as some of the challenges. And really want to hear from the nonprofits, but also from a grant maker perspective, you had a team to run also. So who wants to start there?
I'll jump in. I tell people all the time that the ACT cohort really changed our lives at Florence Creighton Services. We engaged in the cohort in our second year of our Caring for Denver grant, our second out of 3 years for our Caring for Denver grant. And to have a much better understanding, we were focusing on one pillar of our program. And after that, I said, everyone, we have to spread the knowledge to all other pillars and do this. It was very difficult. Oh, it was a 1-year commitment. We were learning, it was me and my clinician in the cohort, and to learn language that was new to us, to learn the dedication needed had to be there. And we were really interested, but to sit and talk and be challenged and answer a lot of questions about who we are, who do we think we are, do other people know who we are, and how are we telling that story? Like, you really have to show up and be willing to do the work. But it was completely worth it when we got to the end, and now we have tools and tricks of the trade, and the entire team is just better off. It's not something that just sits with leadership and the grant writer. It's been shared with all of the boots on the ground.
Yeah, I just want to really echo and build on a lot of what Danica said. The workbook is 70 pages long. My team is my team is me and a program facilitator, and so I was the person who was really primarily participating in the cohort. So as the program director and the lead evaluation person and the data entry person, I really echo what Danica's saying about okay, I'm really going to kind of step back and I'm going to, push myself. And I was a part of the cohort this year, which is also for us year 2 of a 3-year grant cycle. And I think, there's a lot happening in the nonprofit and education world always, and particularly in this current moment. And I think that made it feel both daunting sometimes, but then also such a grounding place for me to come back to, the orientation of the values in the work, and, the kind of constant callback to the meaning of the work and why we're doing it, and how our, all of our evaluation plan can work together. I found it actually, despite it being a significant commitment, I found it being really heartening to engage in.
Thanks, Megan. What about for the grant makers?
I'll share something that came to mind. Kristen, we had those 3 different pathways that we were, partnering on. And, the biggest reflection is that for us, I think the ACT cohort, the folks we talk to who have finished it can point to the greatest change for them and their organization. And on our side, it didn't really take anything from our team to do it because ResultsLab had their model and managed all of it. And some of our other partnerships, things we did, Kristen, which were much more oriented around you all helping grantees do their work within our model, that still took a lot of coordination between our two teams. And so we kind of learned that along the way that, like, for funders who might be listening in right now, is that we were originally hoping that like this would take work off of our team. And so that other way that we were partnering with you all for those first 2 years, we didn't find it was saving time on our team. But it was helping people get to better places for reporting. But we really just had to kind of weigh that internally and think about, how much we could sustain on our end, even though that we were really invested in the grantees being at a better place to be able to report. But none of that applied to the ACT cohort, right? That was a place where people got everything they needed from you all, and they, grew so far. So that was something that we have been thinking a lot about, just how you set it up and the time and resources it takes from your team, so yeah.
Yeah, that was an interesting journey also for ResultsLab to really be thinking like there's so many different ways to build capacity. And what is really capacity building? It's learning. And we know that learning happens, it's a very personal journey. People take on information and practice with it in all different ways. And so we really were thinking about how do we try a number of different modes of engagement and modes of commitment and ways to interact with all the things that we know are necessary for data and evaluation practice. So yeah, there were some great learnings there. I'm really curious. This next question it kind of builds on what you were starting to say, Donica, about tools and tricks of the trade. And I'm really curious how this experience, like on very day-to-day, sort of operations way, like how has it influenced how your team approach data learning and evaluation? Like did it end up having more around using the data? Was it measuring impact? Was it reporting? Was it systems? Like what were the things that you really were influenced by each of your experiences?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it to like the 3 of the 100. It's so many things. I think the first thing for us that changed operationally is, are we asking the right questions? And establishing that question first after looking at what is our purpose? What are we here to do? And how do we know that we're doing it? And so what are those questions that will lead us to that answer? And then by having established that question, what are we collecting? And we really were able through this program to look at like really data fatigue. We can't collect everything. And especially with youth, when you have a really good solid 15 to 20 minutes, what questions are you going to ask that are going to get us to what we need without being too invasive, without losing their attention? How to build trust? When do we ask what questions? Is this for the intake? Is this for later? And ultimately, like, we have an example. We have a question in our intake is, how many of your parents graduated from high school? And a great information question. And what does that tell us in terms of our impact, or what does that tell us in the type of parent they are? Like, does X dictate Y? And if we only can ask 15 questions, is this the question to ask so that we can be of support? And so because we're able to do that now and shorten those things so we can be in relationship with our young people, we developed a care team meeting every week that brings all departments together and looking at the data so that we can pivot really on demand. If these are the trends we are seeing, we need to support that. If this is not working, we need to drop that. And so to really be in tune with the community, especially this year, as things are happening to our community, how do we support and what are we seeing and what is the priority? And so food insecurity has not been a challenge for us in the past. This year, it was definitely a challenge. And so the feedback we're getting from our youth on being able to access affordable food that they'll eat, food that is of the culture. And so when we're receiving that feedback, how do we tell funders, hey, thank you for all the tomato sauce, and this is what our people are saying, this is what our data is saying about the needs of our families. So I feel like being able to utilize the data weekly and what is data, right? When we're checking in and have these informal conversations, how are we collecting and storing that? Like, it doesn't have to be always this very specific survey that's got 54 questions on it, and this is what our people are saying. And then we can advocate for our community, and we do that every week, and then we do it monthly in a certain way, then we're doing it quarterly. It's just giving voice to our people is really how it's changed the way we operate.
Donica, you mentioned sort of the new care team meetings. Were there any other tools that you ended up, with at the end of your engagement?
Oh, the workbook is amazing. So in particular, as part of I really appreciate you saying like the low stress, low pressure. We got to try something in the cohort, and we chose to do voice memos as a way to capture client experience. And so through doing that, we were, flabbergasted at what folks were saying was working and not working for them. And I was able to then support my clinician on, we need to get you more training in this area because this is what they're saying they're needing. And so then as we entered our second year without our coach, we were getting a little worried, like, oh, it's time for voice memos. Are we going to do this again? Do we even know what we're doing? And then we open up the workbook, and it's kind of like, right, like, do you give FlowCrit a fish or teach FlowCrit how to fish? Like, now we know how to fish. And so we just followed step by step, like, okay, the first thing we do is this, like being able to follow how to collect qualitative data. And then we were like, oh my gosh, we have to do a thematic analysis. What does that look like? Okay, not only can we go back to the workbook and the instructions, but we can go back to our old data and see the notes from our coach on how to get us through looking at this information. So it really was just like a copy and paste of the year. And so that, particularly with voice memos, that tool has been very helpful.
Thanks. Who else?
I would say for us, both the mental model and the day-to-day practice are different in a lot of similar ways in terms of, I do think I came into this sort of approaching our data as something we gather via a Google survey, and this sort of I never loved this. I just didn't know how to do it better. A kind of yes, no tally that I was gathering during monthly roundtable conversations. And I just I knew there was a better life out there than that. But I didn't know how to get there. And I think one thing that I found really unique and very, I just keep using the word heartening about the experience, was my ability to say, in partnership with my coach, hey, this data can actually, we are spending all this time and energy asking our youth leaders in particular to reflect weekly in a sort of journal style format. How are we then, what does the feedback loop look like in order to use that in order to support them in informing their development and facilitation of programming, right? So it wasn't just, okay, we're gathering this data about you and we are going to use that to report to our funders. It was, hey, I was able to build both tools and an analysis practice where that is a part of, very similarly, our weekly conversations where they're reflecting on, we went from having sort of a generic belonging and connection Google form questions to, specific CASEL skill aligned questions that we're asking both attendees on a survey, and then our youth leaders are sort of doing a deeper dive reflection on themselves and their growth in their leadership journey. And then we can see, okay, are we developing what skills are we developing? What are we maybe not hitting? And then we can engage our youth leaders and, okay, like, look, here's where we're at. Like, how does this inform what we do? And it made it so much more exciting. And it really helped me to build a youth participatory action lens in our day-to-day practice, which I think is something that our data was not getting us to before.
Yeah, you raise one of the components that we saw a lot of was, each organization has your own organic and sort of context, and you have your own values and mission and driving, principles for how you do what you do. And one of the things that in both the one-on-one consultancies as well as the ACT Learning cohort that organizations get to sort of try to think about is how do we match our data practice with our mission, with our values, with who we actually serve. Like, is giving a survey in this context right? Like we ask those questions, and sometimes the answer was no. So it's really interesting to hear you, Megan, talk about like that participatory component and how that was a really important component for you, whereas for other organizations, it may or may not have been what they were striving for. And having that individual coaching, sort of allows for that. I'm really curious, Haley and Rebecca, how is this experience influence how you might do reporting or capacity building or, going forward? Like, what are you thinking now?
I can say for me, I love those stories. Thank you, Danica and Megan, for sharing, because it reinforces for me a hypothesis that we had, but has shown through this work consistently, which is from a funder perspective, this is a long game. So this is not about walking in and now all of a sudden every grantee has a perfect tool and does perfect reporting. I love Megan's story. She was at yes, no, and a participatory way. She just didn't know how to get to the next level. And so a piece of how we approach data and how we approach this this work with grantees and capacity building is, what is the best next step? And being okay with trying something out and it doesn't work. And it's all right when they get on a learning call and say, this was kind of a failure, but we learned this and now we want to try this new thing. I mean, that to me is that curiosity, that motivation, that excitement. But as funders, you have to be patient and you have to understand where your grantee is, and that next level is super important. We're talking about sustainability, so we've got to do it in micro shifts, and that it's absolutely okay to try, explore, experiment, do something different, as long as there's learning that comes out of it that we can find actionable for the next year of the grant. So just an important learning on our end that got reinforced from this. I don't know, Haley, do you have anything you'd add?
I actually have a follow-up question for Danica and Megan. My question was, because I think this is something that, I hear a lot of interest around, right? I think, the slides on the screen, right, is what we set out to hopefully create shifts in. And I think you both, in telling your story, we could hear parts of each of those things. But I think what is the hardest thing for people to, and we're still learning this, right, is like, how do you actually go about shifting mental models, right? And so I could hear you both talking about there being mental model shifts for you and within your team. Is there anything that you can point to from the experience that you think drove that? Like, what were some of the components of this that were helping get to a mental model shift, right? As opposed to just a tool or a data process, shift. Is there anything that comes to mind if you think back on like, what was it? What was the thing that was happening, that was helping us get there? Or was it just the whole combination of it all? Just genuinely curious.
Thanks, Haley.
Yeah, I think for me, hopefully I'm tracking. I think that there's a part maybe halfway through in the cohort learning about lived experience and valuing lived experience and what does it mean to have evidence, and to be able to have a learning question and then to come to the table with my people's voices and my community's voice. It was able to shift the model because it was no longer a checklist. Well, so-and-so wants to know X, Y, and Z, so therefore we report on X, Y, and Z. It's actually, okay, no, if we want folks to have better mental health, then what qualifies as better mental health as reported by our people? And what does it mean to have good mental health in this time and place? A lot of conversation that's happening at the Flow Crit campus right now is really, have you seen the world? Lots of people's mental health is not great. And so is the solution to fix, to be completely better? Is that a realistic goal? And so what does it mean to cope with mental health, to cope with the day-to-day? How are people identifying that? And then how are we measuring that? And how are people not identifying that, but thematically it's coming up. So now we can pull that out and now ask this because we've heard enough people talk about it. So yeah, whatever part of the cohort was about evidence and that we get to decide as a community what our evidence is, I think that was the most helpful to us.
I think for me, it was sort of two things, well, three things really. One, I think there's, you know, the kind of at the beginning of the align or at the end of the align phase, you sort of drill down on like, so what are, let me get curious about my program and let me really, and I really resonate with the sort of like, let me get really intentional about, I want to know, I'm a curious person. That is a good thing and a bad thing about me. So I want to know everything about my program, right? I want to know all the things, but it's like, no, I felt like it really helped me get more intentional about like, what can I learn that is going to drive impact? And I really agree, how can I use like this sort of blend, I feel like Danica brought it up when she was talking earlier, this blend of kind of, I also think I went into it thinking like, oh, this is going to have to be a very super complex system. And I was trying out all these tools and then I would be like, oh, like it looks like this on paper, but then in the room, like these are these other things that were happening. And I felt like my coach did such a brilliant job of kind of helping me move the quantitative piece forward, but not lose the qualitative, and to treat the qualitative as like, this is real valuable data that you are gathering, and how do you kind of blend those two and make it, I felt like that made it feel more authentic and purposeful to me. And then once I started to see it, actually, to be honest, I don't know that my mental model shifted until I started to see it actually informing the work. And then I felt like once I saw it informing the work in a way that was totally separate from, or not separate from, but like that was way more granular than sort of, oh, this will serve as my mid-year reporting. Once I saw it start to inform my work on a weekly basis, that really helped me kind of like catalyze what I was learning.
Thank you for sharing that. For Caring for Denver, has it changed, or are some of the learnings that you have, are they shifting or changing any way that you're doing reporting or frameworks, or and any sort of your practice that existed before we started this?
That's such a good question. I think because the capacity building creates a space. Well, for those of you that don't know how we operate in terms of reporting as an organization, grantees have a short report that they fill out where numbers are involved. So they are providing some numbers. They can have up to 3 metrics they report on. And then we have a learning call that's more qualitative. It's all those things that you can't, it's that transformational things, the things you can't put in a number. So there's a place to talk about it and also reflect on the quantitative data as well. But I think what we've started to see is the importance of having an opportunity for grantee partners to report in a way that makes sense to them. So we've had grantees that have developed. So for instance, Danica, with oh, what do you call it, Danica? I can't remember. The voice memos, is that what it is?
Oh, the voice memos.
Voice memos, to be able to upload a summary of that, or some like key quotes or things like that, to kind of reinforce for grantees there's a place and space for you to take all that creative, all the creative things you're building, the curiosity that you have. There's a place now in reporting for that. We could talk about that early on in the process and make sure that there's space for sharing those things, and it just doesn't have to fit into like our reporting model. That's the first thing that comes to mind for me.
Lovely. So one thing I'd love to hear is just like, if you could just pick one thing that was the most meaningful about the experience for you, what was it? And not necessarily to you or your organizations, but we're all on this like learning journey. So I'm just curious. And I know I had this experience. I was thinking about this for myself as someone who was part of this. And I know it's, for me, when people ask, I think the thing that I took from it was this idea of how do you help, or we figured out along the way, like some important ways to help practitioners combine qualitative and quantitative data to tell a story. And so in less in low effort ways, right? So, you think about that as sort of a evaluation report, that can be like a really big undertaking, but to do it in a way that wasn't going to take, a dissertation to figure it out. So how do you do it in a way? So that was the thing that was really like a spark for me. What were some of your sparks as an individual learning? Could be for your organization, but I'm really curious as us as individuals.
It's such a good question.
I think for me, at some point, I started to find our data kind of fascinating. And then I was like, oh, wait, this is, and it was really, I really just echo what Haley was saying, or I don't remember if it was Haley or Rebecca, but the sort of, the depth of care and knowledge in my coach, where I was taking this tool out in the wild and then I come back and I'm like, oh, I built it. I'm so happy. It looks so great. It's going to be awesome. And then I take it out there and then I'm like, oh, they're copying each other's answers. Like, what do I do about that? Just things that were kind of like all the human aspects of, what it looks like to build something. And I think having just the depth of engagement and the space to then come back and bring my learnings back and be like, okay, and have it not be like, I just have to keep using this tool that's doing like 65% of what I want it to do, but I can keep refining this until it is both serving, feeling authentic and engaging for community. I think that was kind of the most meaningful part for me.
I think the most meaningful part, and for Flow Crit, would be closing the gap between our departments. So there's this, interesting cycle in nonprofit, right? Development goes out here and tells the story to raise the fund so that we can have the resources to make impact. And they're working with us and relying on us to tell the true story. What is the real need? Where's the real impact? And so we need to be able to give that to development so that we can get the support that we need. And programming staff is really busy. And so we're having this experience. Things are informal. We're seeing the day-to-day lives, and we can vouch for our programming and cannot always articulate that programming. And so there can be a discrepancy between what's being reported out or what leadership may understand versus what like the folks who are doing the day-to-day work are seeing. And how does the whole organization see the story of what is true and to be validated in the things that our community is saying, right? Because funders and development want the data in this very specific way. And I think there's a lot of work around that to change the relationship between funders and nonprofits. And you want this thing in the specific way. How do we translate what we know to be true into the way that it's going to be received so that we can go out there and get the funding? Because really it's about articulation. At the end of the day, those who can articulate it well get the funds, not necessarily those who are actually making the impact. And so how do we close that gap? And so to be able to tell our story to our funders, to development, to our community accurately, we're now getting the resources that are actually making the difference. And we feel like we're seeing that now kind of in our fourth year out.
I think I'll share that for our team, something that has sparked for us in the last year or so. You know, we do a lot of capacity building internally as well, right? Like, you know, that's also my job day to day, right? And ResultsLab is this partner that does it in additional ways. And so one of the things that this has been helping us understand is how much, like, as Rebecca was saying, the curiosity is the capacity building, right? Getting people to a place where they can follow their own curiosity is really so much of like where we hope people get, you know, through being in partnership with us. And then the other thing that has just been so clear is that that works best when people have a coach to do it with them, right? And so that's something that I think has been, yeah, just a good lesson, a good reaffirming, you know, just putting our efforts there, you know, to really give people the space to be validated, to be curious, you know, in a supportive, relational way. That's kind of our, yeah, it's nice to see that reaffirmed and for us in our model.
Lovely.
I was going to say the most meaningful thing I think for me is I've been an evaluator for a very long time. I've worked in the foundation space for a very long time. To be able to be on a call with a grantee and they are real about their data. They have numbers that don't look great, or maybe they look wonderful, but they understand why and how, and they're able to tell that story and actually be in a reflective dialogue around that. So anytime a grantee says, yeah, like it looks great, but you know what, it doesn't really match what we're doing. I think we really need to shift to look at this thing. So anytime those kind of conversations are happening, that just reminds me, you know, reinforces for me how important this is. And I find that most meaningful when it is the grantee that's driving the reflection and the conversation. And it's the truth about their work, not just what they think the funder wants to hear.
Yeah. You know, this sort of next reflection really, like we've been talking about sort of meaning and sort of things that went well and all the benefits. And I think there's a real a real value in also talking about sort of the reality of what it meant to be in this experience. And so this next reflection is really for Danica and Megan, for you. Like, what advice would you give a grant maker thinking of sponsoring something like this about, you know, how to do this? I mean, what do they need to know to make this meaningful? What do they need to know to do more of, less of, differently, so that it can be of the best use for nonprofit partners from your perspectives?
I was thinking about this question, and I think we've touched on a lot of it, but I think you know, when we build programming, we want programming to be accessible and to be intentional and to be grounded in relationship. But oftentimes our sort of support doesn't necessarily match those same criteria that we're using to design programming. And I think I found the ResultsLab support very accessible, very intentional. And I think the grounding in relationship, you know, was really important. I felt like I am not surprised to hear Haley say it did not take. One concrete piece of advice I would have is I'm not surprised to hear Haley say it did not take work off their team's plate, because I felt like actually what I probably could have just kept my reporting framework and the data was looking good and everybody was happy with it, right? But I knew that there was something better. It wasn't really. I knew there was something better. And I think the partnership between ResultsLab and Caring for Denver, and there being an ongoing conversation between ResultsLab and Caring for Denver around how is this work going to be represented in our, you know, reporting structures and end of year calls. I mean, Caring for Denver is great in terms of the flexibility of the reporting structure to begin with, but I felt like that took a lot of, you know, if I had been participating in a capacity building initiative that was not partnered with, you know, my funder, then I would have had to do all of that translation or had to kind of navigate the relationship between what I'm doing on the ground and then how is the funder gonna, and I felt like I'm not surprised it didn't take very much work off your plate as a team. It took a lot of work off my plate as a grantee, and it gave me a lot of space and permission to sort of sandbox, try things without kind of a lot of like layer of anxiety around how that was going to then like translate into the funder space, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that bridging between.
Yeah, I would say be excited about our failures, and then reframe them to learnings. We want the same outcome. We want our communities to be served. And as programming is building their landscape and their understanding so that grant makers can build the understanding as well, we need to come upon our boundaries. Like, it's really important for us to understand what doesn't work and having the freedom to explore that. And so in our first year of caring for Denver, our learning curve was so like, we just shot out the roof. We thought we were going to serve 20. We ended up serving like 70 something. We were like doing so amazing, and we were on this high and we were so excited. And then we pushed it a little too far for ourselves in year 2. And we said we were going to do all of these things. And this particular tool we were going to use as evaluation, it was going to be amazing. And we did not come out, traditionally, historically, what we call on top. It was not a great year in terms of reporting positive outcomes, but it was a great year for reporting on our learning. We now understand this about our population. We understand this about our staff's capacity. And if we want to move in this direction, we're actually going to need this resource. And because we built this relationship with Caring for Denver, that was not a scary place to be on that call and in that grant reporting at the end of year 2. And because of that learning in year 2, we again then skyrocketed in year 3 in terms of the impact we were making. And so I think Rebecca had said this is for the long game. It's for the real impact for the community, and that's years and years and years. And so there has to be learning and has to be comfortable for the program participants, for the grantee to learn, or we're going to get these numbers that look good and we don't really talk about it. Like, what are we really trying to do? We're really trying to make impact.
Love it. Thank you for sharing that. For those of you who are thinking about possibly exploring something like this, we're going to definitely send some resources out, and so you can continue that conversation. We have one more question, and really this is for Haley and Rebecca to sort of talk about. And then we're going to open it up to some questions from you all in the chat. And then we'll close out for the day. So we have, we'll go to about 10:15. So this next question really has to do with some of the key lessons. This was a learning for the organizations as well as for the nonprofit partners. And so can you talk a little bit about what some of your key lessons learned from this initiative have been?
Yeah, so we're a learning organization, so this is always where we're trying to go with everything we do. And so we were sitting back and thinking about this together yesterday, and you've heard a lot of them, right? This is part of it, is always kind of reflecting and thinking about, how we actually do this in partnership with our grantees and for our team. But these are a couple key ones that really came to mind for us in terms of where we found some important lessons to take forward. The first one being how important it is in order to build, the next phase of capacity for an organization around their evaluation and learning is the importance of their alignment of their program model and their data. And one of the things that I think ResultsLab helped us figure out, and through our conversations with our partners, is that that's one of the biggest gaps that we find folks really end up recognizing once they get into these kinds of conversations, if they have a really great space, as Danica and Megan have been describing, with that coach to help them think through this. And so really being able, having an ability to understand the logic, the theory of change of your program, and making sure that it really is what they're doing and what they hope to change. That is the fundamental first place that most organizations either need to be at to then move from, or they need support defining that better for themselves. And so really just recognizing for us that we need to make sure we're always ensuring that or starting from there with our partnerships. So either internally with how we're supporting folks or with the supports we're providing them through our additional partners, is that that has to be kind of fundamental to their success, not just jumping to data or your next data, method. And that, readiness to be in a space to expand your capacity also really matters. And that's not surprising, but we've learned a few things about how to identify or how to be in dialogue with people about the commitment and the readiness. Obviously, we always really emphasize that it's voluntary, that they can change their mind at any point. We definitely had people who are in the ACT cohort in this last round, or probably in both of our cohorts, Kristen, that ended up saying, I just can't do this right now. Like my staff I've had turnover, like we're focusing on other things, and that's okay, right? But the other thing is that when people are ready, I think it's kind of, some people might hesitate that the ACT cohort was a year-long commitment and you're supposed to have 2 staff people there. And you mean, as Danica was saying, like it was a lot of time and it was hard work, but if they are at the right place, it actually, and the value of the support matches the commitment they're putting in, then it really works. And so that was something that was really clear, that when people had a really good coach who was really, as Megan was saying, like taking a lot of the work off of Megan. So Megan could do the thinking and the implementing, but some of that additional lifting was like, I think Megan, when we talked the other day, you were saying that, you could have learned these things and been like, yeah, okay, this is how you might do this. But then you're like, I never would have gotten around to it. I never would have had the time to like take it to the next level. And the coaching is what made that possible. And so that kind of goes to the third learning, for us, is that if people have the time, the commitment, and the really good coaching, then the investment value is there for them, but really to then be in a place where they can be applying it and practicing it and, doing these things that over a year, they can actually go so far. But, that's just, that coaching piece is just really essential for them to be able to practice and apply. And, it's not, we've had great success with people attending, a webinar on survey design. People love that, but it's not the same thing as capacity building. And so we really, that space to apply their learnings and be in a supportive coaching relationship has been one of the most essential things that we've seen.
Thanks, Haley. You have a question in the chat. Can you offer some specific examples of when a program model and data are aligned and when they are not?
Yeah, great. I don't know. Megan and Danica might be able to offer some too, right? I think some of what Danica was sharing in her story was similar, but some of the things that we often see is when people get the opportunity to think about the alignment, is really sitting with that question of, what am I planning to see change for the folks that I'm working with, that is the value I'm bringing, like not the value in terms of something being valuable, but my values. What are my values of what I'm hoping to be generating in my community? And then making sure that are all the things I'm doing aligned to my values? And then is the data that I'm capturing aligned to pointing back to all of those things? So I think what I've been hearing from folks as they've been sharing with us what they've gotten out of the ACT cohort, is really just bringing all those things into one way of being able to see how they're all connected. So a specific example, gosh, does any of you have a good off the top of mind? Yeah, Danica, go for it. I know you do.
Yesterday example, basically. So we have a rubric that we use to score our parents on their self-sufficiency. And so I asked my manager, because everyone is in the data work, and I said, okay, how many folks have either maintained or improved on the matrix? The answer was 99%. And I said, wow, that's amazing and really hard for me to believe. Like, tell me more, right? So now I actually understand like where my place is and my position is to ask questions. And so when we looked at who was being evaluated, it was all of our folks who have supportive families and no barriers. So the expectation would be folks who don't have barriers. I mean, like, then I was like, oh, well, yeah, if you don't have any barriers in the way, you have transportation, you have stable housing, it is highly likely that you will grow and flourish. But our N did not include those who withdrew from our program, those who had to go to work because there wasn't enough income being brought in the home. So if we're looking at, we're evaluating and making ourselves look really good by 99% improvement, it's like, okay, if our mission is to serve teen parents and get their barriers out the way, we don't get to pick and choose the folks who don't have as many barriers. We're here to serve all. And so stepping back to say, like, hey, the data we collected does not match the mission. And literally that happened yesterday. And so we'll be having those conversations of who do we serve, and how do we serve them? Do we have the capacity? We've got a high school facing team. We have an alum facing team. Do we have enough staff to be able to make the impact that we want? Because we're only collecting data on a part of our population. So we have much to discuss in July.
Yeah. The other example, real quick, that comes to mind for me is oftentimes folks are collecting too much data. And so it's actually a process of like weeding down your data to like, what is my program helping to do? And how do I know it when I see it? And what data is pointing to that? And just really narrowing into those few things. Then it allows you, to Megan's point, actually learn an action from your data, and it allows you to really tell your story really clearly. So I think oftentimes I see it mostly in too much data, as opposed to, which is just another way of being misaligned data. But yeah, it's you're not really sure why every question you're asking is pointing back to the value and the, intention of your program.
We had another question come in, and this does say significant time. It is a long game. I mean, it's learning how to do evaluation and deal with data in a professional environment rather than sort of a scholastic. It's applied, it's day to day. What do you need to have in place before you start the coaching process to set you up for success from the organization, from your perspectives? What do you need? Besides, you need time, right? That's part of it. But what else do you need?
I think from a technical standpoint, a multi-year grant cycle is very helpful, because you're able to, as we've both talked about, you're able to sort of invest in something with like a durable partnership that makes a really big difference. I think for us, it's time, but one of the things that helped us do was craft protected time in order to synthesize and analyze the learnings on our own. And I think that, Danica mentioned that too, and how FlowCrit has used their data is like time. To be honest, like we didn't need, the only resources we really needed were the resources that were brought to us. In terms of my coach, one of the things that she really did that I just want to highlight is also from a practice standpoint, took really good notes in our meetings, sent me really detailed, thoughtful wrap-up emails of like, here's what you're going to do, here's what I'm going to do. And she would always leave our meetings and be like, I'm going to gather some additional resources on this. I'll share those with you. So I felt like I didn't need very much in place other than sort of curiosity and commitment, and like engagement in the work I'm doing, which is, of course, right, I felt like I didn't need very many resources in place, other than a willingness to stick with it. But I do think some of the resources, from the support side, in terms of the fact that ResultsLab really owned kind of like communication at a high level during the process was essential for me. If I would have been if I wouldn't have had the workbook, if I would have been taking my own notes and capturing, doing and kind of piecemealing things together, I don't think that what I would have left with would have been, I think it would have been a lot like mushier and harder to stick with. So I'd say that like in terms of resources, that feels like an important thing on the support partner side.
I can't underscore Megan enough that is also my answer. I don't know how many of you work in an organization where the battle for time to meet together is at an all-time high, and folks will schedule over things, making the assumption you can move a block of time over, or making decisions on what the priority is for you. And so the thing that we needed the time, And we needed the understanding in the organization that you don't schedule over this, that this is a priority, and that when we are blocked off for this amount of time, that it is protected. And something I'm bringing to the table back now, we had a lot of learning in year 2 because we were in that cohort, because ResultsLab and Caring for Denver blocked the time out for us, right? That is our partner, and we're in these meetings. And so my ask to my organization is, the reason we had that so much learning is because we had thinking time. And so how much thinking time are you allowing for your program people? Your people in your org know what's going on and know what to do. They just need time to pause and to look and to like talk amongst each other and to think. And so I think not only in that cohort did we need that protected time, but then learned like that protected time needs to be extended into the everyday operations of our nonprofit anyway. Yeah.
Kristen, I have the first thing that came to mind for me for this question. I'll just share really quickly. And it's actually this question that I see Jennifer asked next as well, is that, you know, what came to mind for me first about like what is required is curiosity, right? Is that for this to, it takes a significant amount of time, and like really what I have found that when folks are able to get a lot out of it is that they have a curiosity, right? They're coming with curiosity. And so that's also the same thing that when, you know, this question about how is organizational readiness to participate in the program measured, typically it's because we see curiosity, right? And so we're in such relationship with all of our grant partners. We're on the phone with them probably more than they want to be on the phone with us, you know, but because of our learning model. But we kind of get a sense of like, this would be really good for them because they're asking questions, they're curious, they're talking about wanting to do things differently or to better understand things. And so then we kind of know that this could be a good fit for them. We don't have any sort of formal assessment or things really in particular, but it's really through our relationship with them that we can typically find people who it works for.
And I can just add to that a little bit too. So we have multiple capacity building partners. ResultsLab is one of our strongest partners. We have quite a few though, because we offer capacity building for communications and operations and other things like that. As the person that holds all of those grants, the readiness to participate looks different depending on the capacity building consultant. And so we have some consultants who have an actual tool that's the checklist that we go through with them. And so the thing that I would say around that I would just recommend to other foundations, be explicit when you are talking to a capacity building partner. What are the characteristics that you see that lead to the most success in this type of approach to capacity building? It's going to look different depending on what they do and how they do it, but making sure you're having that conversation and learning through it. I think Kristen, you know, we learned a lot just with the ResultsLab, you know, where we initially started in terms of what readiness looked like as we got into the model that kind of evolved. So there was the curiosity. There were also, you know, a few other things around leadership involved, people who decision makers, you know, being involved with ACT, those kinds of things, just things for us to be thinking about. So really just being in conversation with your potential partners around their approach can help you figure out what readiness would look like, but it's going to be different depending on who they are and what they do.
Well, this is a great place to end with readiness. And hopefully this has sparked for all of our attendees, sparked some thinking. ResultsLab has some tools for readiness. We also have some tools. I saw a question earlier about the best practices and models. We really looking forward to continuing the conversation if people are interested in that. Right now, I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists for sharing your journey, sharing your thinking, and sharing, you know, what it's been like to really dig into evaluation and data practice. So thank you for taking the time today to do that, and really hope that we continue to partner with all of you on this. I do want to just let people know that we will be sending this out. Caring for Denver has prepared these resources to learn more about their approach, so you can go and learn more, and you can find out some of the details and maybe some of the answers to some of your questions there. We also wanted to let people know that we right now have a ACT Learning Series Align phase option right now for coaching. It's a new service for us, and it's really just digging into the Align component of the Align Capture Transfer phase. And so we do have this opportunity happening right now. And then we also hold coffee collectives, which is just an opportunity to meet with us and continue the conversation, learn more, whether you're interested in something like an ACT learning cohort, or if it's something just around evaluation data practice needs in general. And our next one is July 15th. So lots of resources to check out. Again, just want to say thank you so much to all of you for sharing your information and your insights about your participating in this awesome initiative that Caring for Denver has been really committed to for the last 3 years. So thank you to all of you. And I think that kind of brings it all together. Thank you to everyone who attended. Please reach out if you want to talk some more, and everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.